Hi everybody, it's Joe Cioffi, and look who's here. It's everybody's favorite cat. It's Kovu. He hasn't made an appearance in a while. Actually, Kovu was diagnosed with diabetes and he has to get 2 insulin shots a day. So he was been a little subdued, but over the last 10 days or so, as he's been getting his shots, he has improved considerably. So I guess he feels up to making an appearance here on our live stream tonight. We've got a lot going on in terms of the weather. I mean, as quiet as it is here in the eastern part of the United States, we do have, this big pattern change that's going to be occurring. And it's all going to be precipitated by events out in the Pacific. And in particular, one of the catalysts with this is Typhoon Lan, which is moving over Japan right now. So we're going to jump right into it and explain what Lan means to the long-term pattern. But first, I want to say hi to meteorologist Phil Buzz, who is on board, and he sees his favorite cat too. Hope you're having a good time, Phil. We've got highs to Christopher, to Southside Boxing, who's from across the pond, to Sean, to Dio, to Wayne, She Gadget, also from across the pond, Jason Schaefer, James NASCAR, and we are going to get the weather portion of this video going. Just a lot happening with weather models, and it's going to be a very interesting next couple of weeks for sure. So just stand by, and then I'll be back afterward, and we'll talk some more. It isn't really all that often that we pay attention to tropical systems in the West Pacific, but in this particular instance, it is important with regards to our long-range weather pattern because Typhoon Lan, which is now moving ashore over Japan just to the west of Tokyo with top winds of 90 knots, 105 miles an hour. This was a Category 5 hurricane just yesterday when it was top winds were 135 knots. So it is weakening as it moves northeastward, but it did move ashore over Japan, at least as a Category 2. Now from here, and this is their weather service and their map plots, and you can see there the track comes ashore near Tokyo, then moves out to the northeast, probably going to be passing to the east of Korea, and then from there it moves northeastward and becomes a large extratropical cyclone. Now you're may ask, okay, well, why is this important? Well, let's look at the European upper air model. This is from yesterday. We're going to start yesterday. We're looking at the Pacific view here, so you can see North America, Alaska, then you have Siberia, and then right here Japan, and here is land from yesterday. And watch what happens as we move forward. Lan moves over Japan and then begins to get involved with a developing upper air cyclone that is in easternmost Asia, which intensifies. This is Tuesday morning, and then becomes a strong storm over the Aleutians in 72 hours. Now, okay, so you could say, well, okay, well, what does that mean to us? Now, watch. I'm going to just roll back Tuesday, and you notice that now suddenly we have a big ridge up in the western part of the United States. We have this deep trough that's in the east. We do have an upper low that's dropping southward near Hawaii, and then we have the low that is going to be what was Lan into a large extratropical cyclone, and that is really kind of the catalyst in all of this. It's the extratropical cyclone is getting energized somewhat by absorbing the remnants of Lan. Then as we move it on to the next period here, 72 hours, so this is Wednesday, you've got that deep trough in the eastern part of the United States and the ridge in the west. And by the way, this remains the signature pattern, because if you look at what happens over the Aleutians in Alaska, you continue to have low pressure there, and you continue to have a general ridge in the Northeast Pacific and on up into the northwestern Pacific Northwest and into southwestern Canada, right through the 10-day period on the European. So these events, these typhoons that recurve, and this has happened before, back in 2014 and 2015, we had two instances of two strong typhoons that wound up basically altering the weather pattern across North America. Now, whether this is a short-term alteration that lasts for 10 days or 2 weeks, or is it a longer-term alteration that lasts for a good chunk of the month of November, remains to be seen. But this is an important development going forward. Now, let's look at what's going to be happening over the next number of days, because the overall pattern with this change at least has made things a bit more interesting and a bit more dynamic as far as action goes in the eastern part of the United States. And there you can see on the GFS, this is on Halloween with this deep trough in the east. But I'm kind of jumping the gun here. I want to start from the beginning and go to today. And there you have it. Okay, at the moment, we're starting out the day with that big ridge in the east, that troughing that's in the central plains, general troughing and a strong jet that comes into the west, and the beginnings of a ridge developing off the coast to the west of Baja California. Now moving on through time, this is for the first cold front that arrives on Tuesday. Deep trough develops here in the eastern part of the United States. You can see it right there, and there's another shortwave trough that's behind it in the west. This ridge is actually out off the coast, pushing on up to the north into the Northeast Pacific and into southwestern Canada. So the first trough goes out, and here comes the second one that dives down for next weekend. And the GFS in particular, this is on the new GFS run, has a fairly strong trough here that approaches for next Sunday. You can see it there, and there's a kicker right behind it. So it looks as if once that trough lifts out, the next one dives in with some pretty cold air to finish off the month of October and into November in the Northeast. Couple of complications in all of this, which we'll get to, but I want to at least now address what's going to happen in terms of the actual weather. So I gave you a sneak peek there of a little bit of snow there, some lake effect. But here we have that first weather system. Now, because of the trough hanging back to the west, that front is going to slow down when it reaches the East Coast on Tuesday. It's going to move very slowly from Tuesday into Wednesday. It's going to take almost 24 hours to move a rather short distance. So this opens the opportunity for some heavy rains. And you can see the GFS is pretty bullish on a band of heavy rains and thunderstorms. And actually, there is a marginal risk of severe weather being indicated by the Storm Prediction Center out of all of this. Back where the low center is, near the upper peninsula of Michigan, looks like some snow for the UP and for parts of Wisconsin there, northeastern Wisconsin. Moving on into Wednesday morning, the rain still lingering along the coast. It may take all day for that rain to move out. So we get this shot of cold air that comes down. Now here comes the next one, right over the Great Lakes. The next weather system already making its dive. There's colder air behind it with snows being forecast for northeastern Minnesota and the upper peninsula of Michigan and northern Wisconsin. There's a trailing cold front with that. And now here's where it gets kind of complicated for next weekend. You're going to have this front along the coast. I'm sure your eyes kind of look down over here into the Caribbean. This is, we've been talking about the fact that pressures are going to remain low in the Caribbean for much of the middle and latter part of this week and into the next weekend. Well, depending on how this trough sets up, it's either going to get kicked out to the northeast, which is what the GFS does, and that's because it has another system right behind it, and you can see that shot of colder air that it brings in toward day 8 and day 9 into the Great Lakes and the Northeast. That's a pretty strong shot of cold air for this time of year. However, the European offers a different solution in all of this, and I want to take a look at that. Both models are pretty much in line with the first event. So I'm just going to kind of jump after that and go to the second one. And we're going to look at the upper air here. Let me just back it up a little bit. So here's our first trough for Wednesday. European actually takes a little longer for this to lift out. The second trough comes behind it. But the European is different than the GFS. The European splits this trough with the northern stream here. Here's the southern part of the jet separating from it. And what happens is that the southern part waits for that second short wave to come down right in there. And as a result, you wind up with a system that lifts up northeastward along the east coast along about Monday night into Tuesday, and you can see it right there. What the European is doing, and I will put up the European's surface map here, because the European essentially grabs that tropical system or something, some sort of low pressure. I mean, whether it's tropical or not, you know, truly tropical or not, remains to be seen. But I'll put it on with the, here we go. So we'll go on this. So here's what the European does. So the European brings that next front and just kind of stalls it out, and it starts to drag this low that's down near Cuba northeastward to the Carolinas, and then right up to up the coast from there, with a substantial heavy rain event up and down the eastern seaboard, much like this would be, you know, much like a typical mid-full nor'easter setup. I'm not sure yet at this point whether I buy this solution or not. I think it's very intriguing that it does this. The key, in my view, in the longer term, aren't pattern changes fun, by the way? Because at least we have stuff to talk about. But when we look at the upper air through all of this, you know, with this deep trough that's in the eastern part of the United States, see, here's the European's view with that trough swinging. See how it splits the southern part and then lifts it up northeastward? Because then you have this second arm that comes through that's right back from Hudson Bay down over into the western Great Lakes. So that thing swings it down and around. When we look at the GFS, it's different in how it handles that northern stream. You kind of see where the southern part of the stream is, but it gets kicked out more to the east rather than getting lifted up to the north, because it really gets very strong with this system that's dropping down. In the meantime, notice, by the way, how the jet runs from the Arctic region all the way down into the southeast. So you do have a connection there that runs a polar connection that goes all the way up from Canada all the way down into the southeastern coast of the United States. So this certainly would argue for a fairly impressive shot of colder air coming a week from now into the Northeast and the Great Lakes and the Mid-Atlantic and the Southeast. When I say a week from tomorrow and beyond. So for Halloween, for the 30th, 31st, going into November 1st. This, again, whether this pattern is going to be something that lasts for more than 10 days to 2 weeks, a lot of factors at play here, so it's hard to really gauge from what we're seeing right now what the longevity of this pattern is. In the meantime, in the West, of course, it's going to be relatively quiet. If we look at the overall weather in the West, we'll pop that up, go back to the U.S. surface map, and there we go. As it loads, there we have it. Okay, so just starting from the beginning, in the West, because of that ridge building in the western part of the United States, you don't really have too much happening. It'll just be basically dry and calm, with most of the activity shifting into the eastern part of the U.S. Why don't we take a look at total snowfall expected during the next 10 days by the GFS model, and you can see some significant snows up through the upper peninsula of Michigan on the order of some 1 foot plus amounts, and into southern and southeastern Canada, even getting some lake effect snows setting up late in the period, if this is correct, from northern New England and on up through the snowbelts in New York State and the western half of Pennsylvania down into West Virginia. Some scattered snows throughout much of the Rockies, but nothing that really stands out. Again, most of the activity is going to be in the east. And in terms of rainfall, we'll use the accumulated precip over the next 10 days. Most of this is, well, this is going to fall from the Tuesday event and whatever weekend event we have. Notice that the rainfall amounts are pretty reasonable across the eastern part of the United States, on the order of several inches. You've got general half-inch plus amounts everywhere east of the Mississippi over the 10-day period, with some pockets of heavy rain and, of course, some pockets of heavy rain and snow over the Great Lakes. Not too much happening out in the west or the Pacific Northwest at this point as the weather pattern calms down. So let me just stop it right here, and we will leave it with a look at the satellite loop of Typhoon Lan as it moves over Japan near Tokyo. And I'm going to switch over now and take your questions. So just stand by. Okay, I'm back. So you saw pretty much what's going on. Lan is going to be a catalyst in this whole big change that's going on in the weather pattern across the Pacific and across North America. Anthony Orr asked the question about whether recurving would have changed it without the help of Lan. I think the pattern change would have happened. What Lan made, the impact of the tropical cyclone being absorbed into that developing system that winds up in the Aleutians, is that it might make that much stronger, and as a result, perhaps prolong this pattern of the ridge in the west, trough in the east. And as someone, Ricky, I think it was, pointed out, of course, there is a downside for you folks in the west as far as the skiing season is concerned, because with this ridge building in the western part of the United States and the weather calming down, the result is going to be not much snows for the west. And we showed you on the snow map, at least over the next 10 days, except for some scattered snows up in the northern Rockies, that would indeed be the case. But on the other hand, we'll see what happens in the east come after day 7, because I think that's where, you know, a week from now and beyond, in maybe the snowbelts in upstate New York and in parts of northernmost New England, you might see your first snows. Delvin, I have not seen any reports yet of what's going on in Japan with regards to Typhoon Lan. Haven't had a chance to look, but it's very close to Tokyo right now as it moves along to the northeast. Kind of behaving almost in the same way these tropical cyclones, when they come up the east coast, and become extra tropical. You can see the satellite on the satellite, the transition that's going on in terms of the structure and in terms of the core doesn't look as well defined, but it still has a definable core with it as it moves along to the northeast. You could have Lido Griffith this coast to coast. I mean, I think your question is whether you could have troughs on both coasts and ridge. Yes, you can. You can have troughs on both coasts and ridges in the middle. Usually when that happens, though, because of how it sets up, you have a lot. It's in a pattern where the Pacific is kind of dominating things, and not so much any flows out of Canada. So you don't have a lot of cold air in those situations. The MJO She Gadget also helping Typhoon Lan cross the Pacific towards the U.S. Well, yeah, it's part of that whole recurving process. MJO is the Madden-Julian oscillation. It's basically watching the tropics out across the Pacific, and particularly as you go to the west. You can just see Kovu right behind me over my shoulder. And how the activity there, oscillates back and forth, and when there's 8 definable phases. I'm giving you a very simplistic explanation of this, but when it's in phase 8, I believe it's 8, 1, and 2, or 7, 8, 1, and 2. That usually means a colder pattern in the eastern part of the U.S. And yes, William Hoover, the World Series will start with temperatures up in the upper 90s to around 100 degrees in L.A. With that easterly, that Santa Ana wind blowing. You need 1,000-a-year snowstorm, 1,000-year snowstorm. Delvin, patience, okay? It's only October. We're not even into November or December yet. Why is it that we can predict things like solar eclipses in advance, but we have a hard time predicting weather? Well, Ryan, the solar eclipse is something that, that's a timing, that's all physics and astronomy. And of course, they can calculate that to down to the second. You can't do it with weather because you don't have every piece of data in the atmosphere. And even if you did, you probably still couldn't do it. But I know. I understand your frustration, though. I understand what you're getting at with respect to the analogy. You can send a man to the moon, but can you forecast the weather for the next day? I mean, it's problematic. Raymond says the European run with the look of the low near New York City looks interesting for this time of year, like a Canadian model run. Well, I understand what you're getting at. And I also could see how the European gets there. Okay, I lend a little support to the European because it is, usually a fairly reliable model, unlike the Canadian. So that the European did what it did kind of gets my attention, and I think the possibility is there. Now whether the GFS is right with that second trough kind of coming in and overwhelming everything or not remains to be seen. And I think that's a valid argument also, that you could wind up with so much cold. You could wind up with, so much cold air aloft coming down that it just kind of overwhelms everything, and there's no room for something to move up the East Coast the way the European has it. So we'll have to see what the next number of runs, what they do with all of this. Wind advisory, not borderline, seeing gales. Well, certainly I think for the immediate coast, and particularly for Long Island and coastal Connecticut on eastward into southern New England and southeastern New England, there could be some fairly gusty winds from the south at 30 to 40 miles an hour. Wouldn't be surprised for later Tuesday and Tuesday night. Less the case, of course, as you go inland and west. But you know what? They may wind up going in that direction with regards to advisories tomorrow or Tuesday. Rain in Boston possible even through Thursday. Yeah, Delvin, you might get some pretty decent rain out of all of this. That front slows down near the coast to get a little wave development on it. You might do fairly well. Dudley Foster, because the chaos theory. Yes, exactly. We all live in chaos. You're right. The rain back to New York City Wednesday, Lidl Griffin. I think the back edge may wind up being at New York City. Models are kind of right on or just east of the city, but I think it could still wind up being near or just west of the city on Wednesday morning. But it might take all day to get it out of Long Island and Connecticut. No problem, Leon. Severe thunderstorm looks similar to last Saturday. Low top thunderstorms for for Tuesday. Yeah, there's a lot of tropical moisture that's going to get drawn up here, so I'm kind of thinking that the thunderstorms might be, big rain producers more than anything else. But with the very warm air that's going to be along the East Coast and the instability, might one or two of those cells be severe? Yeah, why not? It's the middle of October. We're kind of in an unusual position right now atmospherically, so let's have at it. If this the new pattern holds into mid-November in southern New England, could we see our first snow? Well, you know what, Christopher? Someone else asked this a little earlier too. When it comes to that type of question this far out in the long range, I can't really give you an answer that has a lot of value. You could have the greatest weather pattern in the world, but if you don't have the troughs in the right position or in the right strength or any one of a number of 100 different things, whatever if you're looking for snow to happen early, it might not. There's nothing that says it can't just be cold and dry. So with regards to that, I think that's a better question when you get inside the short range. So maybe when we get into the middle part of, we get into, say, the first 7 or 8 days of November, when we got a good sense of what the upper air pattern is going to be like, at that point, maybe we'd be in a better position to assess the risk for an early snow for downstate areas in New York and northern New Jersey and, say, and southern New England. But I really, it's hard for me to give you that kind of an answer now because I just don't know what it's going to be like. Anita Leahy. Updates off the Kerry, Ireland coast. 2 really bad storms in 6 days, and now this monster off to the west. Okay, the 2 storms I know about. I got some questions, though, with regards to the idea of another one, but let me just take a look. Hang on one second. I'm going to look here off screen and see what's happening. I'm just waiting for the maps to load, so just be patient here, folks. And I think I can jump to 60 hours. Okay, so here we go. So you had that gale center move through the second one. I don't really see anything. To tell you the truth, it looks pretty quiet for you guys after we get through. You know, there's still some rain to work through Monday, and some on and off rain Tuesday and Wednesday. But then after that, it kind of gets dry for the most part across England and Ireland. So there's no Anita. There's no other storm coming. You've got you had Ophelia. You had this gale center that went through on Friday night, Saturday. I think you're done with regards to that. So, but I don't see anything beyond just some, common stuff. Okay, I'm not sure. I'm having some issues, folks. I don't know what the problem is tonight, but I am having some issues here with the live stream. I thought maybe I got rid of it before, but apparently I didn't. Oh, okay. It seems to have righted itself. I apologize. I know that dropped out a couple of times. I'm not sure what's happening here in terms of some signal issues, but apparently there are some. But they seem to have rectified themselves at the moment. David Schwartz, I want to see the leaves change, but I think we're in for a muted leaf color season. I agree. The leaf color change, the leaf change is going to be, maybe quick. The sun, all these sunny days that we've had have kept everything green for a much longer period of time. Although I got to tell you, near the coast here, I mean, we usually don't see the change here until the last week of October, last 6 or 7 days of October, first week of November. So it's the areas to the north that probably have been slowed the most. But you might wind up seeing them change in a big hurry, and the peak may only last like a day or so. So you better pay attention. Okay. So you're going Maria merging with Lee off the west coast. So that was the first one. So Ophelia was the second one. You just had the third one last Friday and Saturday, but there's nothing after that. Okay, you're done for now. All right, Southside Boxing. Post those on message on my Facebook weather page. I'll take a look at those pics. Yes, David, it is the cat. He's actually supposed to be feeling better because he hadn't appeared in a video in so long, and now apparently he's feeling better from his diabetes. He gets 2 insulin shots a day, as I mentioned at the beginning. All right, folks, so let's call it a night here. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Giants are getting clobbered. The game's almost over anyhow. You can check out website. I got a couple of website posts on meteorologistjoecioffi.com regarding the pattern change and regarding Typhoon Lan, so you might want to check those out. And also, you can go to my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, for all the latest. Thank you for those of you who have been hitting the super chat every once in a while. I really appreciate it. Or if you've been putting some coin into my PayPal, I also very much appreciate it. Thank you so much for that. And we will see you tomorrow. Back tomorrow will be weekday time, so live streams will be at 6 p.m. Eastern time, Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, we can do them a little bit later. The little cat's deciding to take a nap, right? You can't see him. Let's see if I can turn the screen. I might be able to give you one last view here. Let me see if you can see him there. No. There. No, I'm having trouble. Sorry about that. It's not working. Okay. He's in a kind of a bad angle, so I can't really show you. All right. Have a great rest of your Sunday, folks, and a good Monday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.